everyone. Thanks, Nikki, for setting everything up. It is a bit of a strange session, COVID-related, social distancing. It's strange knowing that there are people out there, but I'm basically talking to the camera. So I'll try my best. Let's start with introductions. My name is Tinus Roux, and our session today is on the ethical framework for the use of facial recognition. So all frameworks come from context. So let me start by explaining my context. So about 10 years ago, my co-founder and myself figured out a way to capture really high resolution images. And being sports freaks, we took this technology to a local rugby game, and we used to capture the whole crowd. And it allowed people to zoom in, find themselves the game, share that on social media. And it was very popular, so much so that we got a lot of calls from around the world. And within 6 months, we were active on 6 continents. And because initially we were the first to do it, and ultimately we were the best to do it, we've been privileged enough to capture, everything from the Super Bowl, Daytona 500, Rugby World Cup, Cricket World Cup, UEFA Championship League, Final Four, basically any tentpole event you can think of, and we've been privileged enough to capture the facts. I have to say though that my favorite out of all of them was Game 7 watch party in Enterprise Center during the Stanley Cup. And given that I was supposed to be in St. Louis, now I'm not, I'm in Cape Town, South Africa. We came here to say hi to the grandparents in February, and then COVID hit, and we've been stuck since. But St. Louis is my other home, and I thought, just to give you an idea of what it is that we do, to share a quick video here. Share screen. And because I don't often get the opportunity to share this video with folks that will appreciate it, and maybe all of you aren't from St. Louis, probably not, but anyway, this is what it looks like when the St. Louis Blues win the Stanley Cup, and there's a South African on his own on center ice. So I'm not sure if the sound came through, but it was a unique experience, and it's a good opportunity to show you guys what it is that I do. This is the resulting image. I hope everyone can see this. It's just a full 360 of the whole venue, and people can zoom in and find themselves in the crowd. So we're in the resolution business. 5 years into the resolution business, let me just kill the screen share here. See everything's flickering. There we go. 5 years into the resolution business, we started picking up trends. I will capture a college football game or 2 on the same weekend. Both will be sold out. We'll find that one had 30% empty seats, the other one had no empty seats. And I started wondering why. So we started counting seats. And being a curious engineer and lazy, I thought, but can't we use computers to count empty seats? And in fact, you can. And that's how I got introduced into the world of computer vision, which is essentially, for those who don't know, the discipline of training computers to analyze images in the way that humans do. And that took me down this rabbit hole. And I had to learn about facial recognition, facial analysis, privacy, and all these things. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about these things and basically making sure that we don't overstep and do anything that's illegal or unethical. And thus my ability to try and speak on an ethical framework for the use of facial recognition in public spaces. So that's the background. Now into the session, and we're going to get right into it. It's a I'm going to start by giving away the punchline. So because it's, to be truthful, as I started preparing, I realized that this is not really a framework. It's more of a rule. It is that simple. And the rule that we're going to work with is that facial recognition should not be used without explicit and expiring consent of the recognized. I'm going to read that again. Facial recognition should not be used without the explicit and expiring consent of the recognized. Now, this is not controversial in any way or form. It is in line with the most stringent facial recognition law, the Illinois BPA Act. It's in line with what the ACLU is trying to do, and it's in line with how my dad feels about it, and probably you and I feel about it as well. The stance is, look, these technologies are great, but don't recognize me without my consent. So there's nothing controversial about this. It's not like other ethical issues like reproductive rights or any of these other things where you have two massive parties lobbying, politicians. Most people feel that this is a common sense approach. And so if that's the case, why is it such a hot topic? And one of the reasons why it's such a hot topic is because we haven't developed shared language to describe it yet. And without shared language, it's difficult to have nuanced discussions. And part of the reason we haven't developed shared language is because we don't really understand how it works. And so if you're trying to provide guidelines for something that you don't understand, well, it's difficult, and no wonder there's so much confusion. So what I thought today is to provide a non-technical overview of how these things actually work, so that we can have some semblance of shared language, and then we can use that to look at the practical implications of this technology and maybe look at one or two use cases. But the fun stuff is going to be in a Q&A, so line them up. I'm looking forward to that. So getting into it, there are essentially 4 elements in computer vision as it relates to faces: detection, analysis, matching, and recognition. So I thought best to explain this would be to maybe use a human analogy. And just before I do that, the trick with this thing is why it's sometimes difficult for people to understand is because the human brain is so amazing. The human brain does all, you'll see now, does all these things so quickly and so seamlessly and so well that we can't really distinguish between them. And that's different from computers. And in computers, these are 4 very different mathematical processes with very different privacy implications. So that's part of the problem, is our brains are so fast. So let's slow down for a second and create a fake analogy. And the analogy is this. Let's say you and I, arrange for a Starbucks meeting at some point next week to discuss facial recognition or politics or anything you think would be appropriate. We haven't met each other, and so you go to your local Starbucks 15 minutes prior to the meeting because you're a diligent person, and if you're not there early, this analogy doesn't work. So what happens? You walk in, you see 2 baristas behind the counter, you scan the room to see if I didn't happen to pitch up early. I didn't. You find a seat, you place down your bag or laptop. After a while, you stand up, you go order a coffee, you sit back down facing the entrance, and now you're waiting. And every time someone comes in, you look up, and you check if it's me, and after precisely at 9 o'clock, I do walk in, we greet each other, and we have a lovely meeting. So let's rewind this scene, because a couple of things happen. As you walked into the Starbucks, you noticed the two baristas. This is detection. You notice two baristas because of your ability to distinguish between a human face and a coffee mug. It's actually object recognition. And we do it from a very early age. Our focus is often on the eyes, but we're good at this. We can pick up faces early and well. In parallel with that, as you did that, you also analyzed these faces, and you picked up that one of the baristas is a male, one is a female. You did this by matching their faces with other faces that you've seen and saying, this looks like most of the males I've seen before. In fact, it looks like a 30-year-old male, and this looks like a 25-year-old female. So if I asked you to provide the geometric differences between male and female facial structure, none of us know that. But the reason why you're so accurate in male-female distinction is because your brain is really good at comparing faces. And that's what you did. You did not measure it. You looked at the face and compared it with hundreds, maybe thousands of other faces, and said, this fits into the male category around the age of 30. Subconsciously, you also did matching. You don't realize this, but say one of those baristas turned around and it happens to be a friend of a friend, you would immediately recognize them. And that means that your brain is actually looking at these strangers and not finding matches until you do. But matching is basically, maybe it's better to describe while you're now sitting waiting for me. Someone enters the Starbucks, you look up, you look at that face, you remember mine from this session or from my profile picture, and you say, look, that guy is 75, Tinus probably not 75, and it's not the same person. And so you go through them until you find a match. And it may be that I look a bit different in real life, but you'll say, I'm good 60% sure that it's the same person. So that's matching. But all the matching you did as the people came in was anonymous. It's only when I came in that you did a recognition. And this gets us to the key part of this, is recognition is only possible if the person was known to you. So your brain essentially tried to recognize everyone in the Starbucks from the moment you came in there, but you couldn't because no one in there was known to you. So I'm going to pause that there because I want to reiterate it with another example. Let's just go through this again. Detection, the process in which a computer identifies an object as a face. Analysis, the process of analyzing facial structures to estimate demographics. Mood also falls into this, but it's the same process. Matching is the process of determining the similarity between two faces. So you get a similarity score. Recognition is matching where one of the faces is known. So matching can happen without your ability to recognize. You can look up at the barista and say, that's not the same guy that was there half an hour ago. That's matching. You don't know his name or the guy before him, his name. You don't have any of their personal information, but you did matching without recognition. So those are the four elements. And once again, not rocket science or anything controversial. It's in the definition. To recognize someone is to identify from having encountered them before. I really want this to sink in because it's important. while it's basic and obvious, it's important not to lose sight of this when we think about systems of surveillance. In the same way that we can only recognize Starbucks patrons we actually know, so recognition, computers can only recognize people they've already identified before. The key element here is a database of known identities. Without pre-existing knowledge, recognition is technically impossible. Let me state it this way. You can have all the cameras in the world, all the drones, and all the satellites. You can capture every human all the time. Without a database of identities, computers can't do facial recognition. So the good news is in this complex world of surveillance, where we often don't know what's coming next, there is a single point of failure, and it's that link. Without that link, the whole thing falls down, mathematically. And that's why, and the reason this is important is that often, and we'll look at some of the case studies now, or some of the examples, often the media would focus on new drone system or everyone's being captured everywhere. Yes, it's important. It's important to go after those things. Mass surveillance is not a good thing. But if we understand that none of these things work without that link, it becomes easier to think about this. So I'm going to repeat before I get into some of the examples. Facial recognition should not be used without the explicit and expiring consent of the recognized. So in our Starbucks example, I was the recognized. You needed my permission. You do not need the permission of the barista to look at him or her, to analyze, to detect his face, to analyze his face, and to match his face against mine, because there is no harm done. If you as a human, if you don't know that person, you're a dumb system, and computers are set up in the same way. So that the key thing is here, the rights of the recognized, the person being matched. We've gone through these things. Let's dive into a few examples. I wish we can open up for questions now, but let's dive. Let's get through these two examples. Some practical stuff. So these are two news stories that I pulled up from just a quick search on facial recognition. The first is in Rolling Stone, why Taylor Swift is using facial recognition at concerts. I'm just going to read this first paragraph. Taylor Swift fans mesmerized by rehearsal clips on a kiosk at her May 18th Rose Bowl show were unaware of one crucial detail. A facial recognition camera inside the display was taking their photos. The images were being transferred to a national command post where they were cross-referenced with a database of hundreds of pop stars' known stalkers. Okay, so this is the tone of this article and subsequent article is Taylor is spying on her fans. It's incorrect. This, in my opinion, and my opinion is not law in any way, this is fine if you understand how facial recognition works. If we go back, yes, detection happened. Yes, analysis happened, maybe. But mostly, they had a list of 20 people that the courts have said that the court puts restraining orders on because they're dangerous. So there's probable cause. And those are the people, those are the recognized that these cameras were looking for. No one else was spied upon. So in my opinion, this is a use of the technology that is ethical and safe. People often say the data was anonymized. It was not anonymized, it is anonymous. Without those links, Taylor Swift security company cannot, it's not saying, hey, that's Tinus Roux. He's too old to be at a Taylor Swift concert, but he's not one of the stalkers. So it doesn't identify me because it doesn't have rights It doesn't have that link for me. It has that link, the link between a name and a face for the stalkers, and it has those links illegally. So it's using this technology to create a safer environment for Taylor and for my kids going to the concert. And it's incorrect to state that there are facial recognition cameras. Technically correct, but I know what they're saying. It's in my opinion a bit overblown. As overblown as that is, the next one is there's no such thing as underblown. It is understated. This is about the ACLU that's sued Clearview AI. So Clearview AI, what they did is they scraped profile pictures off Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So my LinkedIn profile picture and my name all goes into the database. Unbeknownst to the public, the company has offered up its massive faceprint database to private companies, police, federal agencies, and wealthy individuals, allowing them to secretly track and target whoever they wishes using face recognition technology. Okay, so this is straight up evil because it goes to the core of this thing. They focused on these links because they know and they knew this is how you recognize people. And if you have that database, you can start selling those links. But the links, they don't have permission to get those links. And it's not a fine line or anything. It's just overtly criminal and very dangerous. So this is wrong. This is, and I'm glad the ACLU is chasing Clearview. And this is why I'm saying that this breaks my rule of, where's my, I'm going through my, where's the slide with a summary. This definitely breaks the rule. They don't have explicit consent of these users, and the consent is not expiring either. So they're in a clear violation of my very simple guideline here. What is scary about this is how easy it is. Technically, anyone can do this. I guess foreign governments are doing it. Anyone in a basement can, with a bit of server knowledge, can do it. So that's why it's, for me, it's important to focus on that link and to make that illegal. And I'll finish with this. That's why the current law in Illinois is really good, because what it essentially says, if a company is found to do this, to focus on that link, then they can be fined for each transgression without the users having to show damages. This is crucial. So if in this court case, for every Illinois citizen that they scraped, I think it's $1,000 fine. Could be more, 4, something like that, to check. But that's a very good approach, because now you're managing not the drones, not the CCTV cameras, but you're managing that database of identities. So, ladies and gentlemen, because I want to get into the discussion part of it, I'm going to stop it right there and just summarize by saying, once again, facial recognition should not be used without explicit and expiring consent of the recognized. I want to summarize in saying that the 4 elements used in facial recognition and computer vision is detection. It's dumb, but accurate. Dumb and accurate in the same sense that a calculator is dumb and accurate. I've got an 8-year-old and we're doing math tables. And so I pulled out the calculator the other day, and he realized he could do any calculation. Dad, this calculator is smarter than you are. And so I said, yes, it's, when it comes to mathematics, it definitely is, but it can't even make coffee. So I think that's important to understand when we talk AI and all these other things, is that these are separate systems and they can be managed safely in separation. So detection, analysis is a similar process. Matching is another process that can be completely safe, except if one of the faces you're matching is a known identity. And that is all I got to say about that. So, Nikki, if you want to open up and throw in a few questions, then we can have a proper discussion about this.
Sure, thanks. That was really interesting. So we do have a question, and the question is, isn't part of the point of using facial recognition the fact that the identification of the person is already unknown? If so, then how can permission from the recognized be obtained prior to use?
Okay, that's interesting. No, what I'll start saying is facial recognition. A computer cannot look at the picture and say, this looks like a Bob. So recognition is not identifying someone out of thin air. It is always finding someone that is known. So the only place, and the difference between, it's a great question, between normal folk like us and someone that's a terrorist trying to come to the country is that law enforcement should be able to show probable cause. That is why, and that's why I love the question, is because we often discuss these technologies in isolation, but that we need to see how they work within legal frameworks, within constitutions, and why democracy is important. Because as soon as you don't have democracy, then like in China, there the government has the right to just look for someone because they have the images. But in most other countries, there are systems in place that forces agencies, law or otherwise, to have a reason to recognize someone. I hope that answers the question.
I don't see a follow-up response, so I hope that answers the question as well. So another question that I have is, you brought up the Constitution and your rights. That's an interesting point. Do you think we'll start to see legislation around the use of facial recognition technology?
It's been very slow. Um, and I think part of it being slow is there are quite a few reasons. One of it is that people don't understand this technical differentiation. So they try and stop the drones and stop the cameras. And as I said, that's not a bad thing. But if people understand that we can create a safer environment with these technologies without encroaching on privacy, I think it becomes easier to have these legal discussions. That being said, I mentioned BIPA, it's Biometric Information Privacy Act, Illinois. It's a good start, and we're seeing other states follow it. California has followed it, and Texas now too. Some of the language isn't perfect, but it's definitely a good start. It puts people on notice. I think there should be, I'm not a legal expert, but there should be federal law. In fact, there should be international law, much like GDPR. And it's relatively simple. As I mentioned in the beginning, if we have a system where I don't need, if you need a single date, but on the 1st of January every year, you get an email from everyone that owns one of those links to get your permission. And at that point, because that's the other problem with this is not like a credit card or anything else that expires. Your face does not expire, although I've hit my 40s, it does feel like my face is expiring, but computers will be able to recognize me going forward. And that's the danger of this particular biometric identifier, is that it needs to, the right to use it to identify me needs to be renewed. So your question was, should there be more laws? Yes. And I think we've got a good start, but I think it needs to be expanded, and I think it can be expanded. Two other points there, given that we don't have too many questions, guidelines I can provide on this. One is, I touched on the difference between, well, let me say, all biometric identifiers aren't equal. For instance, a fingerprint is much safer for us as general public than my face, because you have control. Me talking here now is you cannot read my fingerprints. You can read my face. So that is why I think facial identifiers should be policed more heavily. And honestly, I don't sign up for anything where you need to get access by using your face, because it's easier just to use a palm print or anything. It's not solving a real problem. So that's the first thing. And I forget the second, which is typical after my age comment. Any other questions? I have a few notes I can babble on, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions if they have.
I don't, let's see, we have a reply on the message. So the question is a reply to the first question.
Yep.
And that is, do you think many people are giving their consent without realizing it because the request is in the fine print that is rarely read?
Yes, very good point. And so that is solvable too, if people want to solve it. I look at a typical model. The two things on that. The one is my advice to people is don't give consent if there isn't real value. So I had an example recently when I returned to South Africa. I flew with Delta with my whole family, and they announced, right, ladies and gentlemen, we're using new facial recognition technology to make our boarding process easier. And what it was is you walk up with your boarding pass, you scan your boarding pass, and then they want to take a picture. And I went and said, I'd like to opt out. And the reaction was, really? So now you have you've built a system, knowingly or unknowingly, Delta's built a system where their employees, it's trouble for them to let people opt out. So now you're getting social pressure. You're that guy. And what I understood there is there's absolutely no transaction there. I'm not getting anything. Delta does not need my face to identify me. I've gone through the whole process. I've given my passport number. I've got my boarding pass. So all they were doing is they were linking my face to their known database. So this is very close to what the other company that I mentioned here, whose name I forgot. It's very close to what they're doing. So my advice is to educate people to not give consent in cases like that. The second one is when I use Google Maps on my iPhone, and every once in a while I get a notification from Apple saying Google Maps has been using your location. Do you want to continue giving that permission? And so that's definitely in the fine print of Google Maps, but because it's such a specific privacy-related piece of data, I wouldn't mind getting that notification. And because I don't think there should be many companies with permission to use my identity. It's a great question, but yes, it's going to be in the fine print. But if laws like BIPA are enforced, not just in Illinois, then companies will have to do that, because otherwise they get fined properly.
One of the things you brought up, and I think this is a really interesting parallel to draw between the use of DNA. If you think about DNA was not something that we knew about, but it was still being collected at a time when we didn't really know what we were going to do with it. And certain cases have, recently gone back and retried cases and looked for DNA to prove out, the guilt or innocence of somebody. And it just kind of strikes me that maybe facial recognition technology is kind of on a similar path where we're collecting this data. We don't really know what we're going to do with it yet, but down the road, it's going to become clear.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the fear, because and why it's and because a lot of these images are saved, and so there's always this focus: when is it going to be destroyed? I don't think that's a good approach, because electronically, nothing really is destroyed. It's always a footprint somewhere, and that's why I'm focused on that link, because let's say is a good use case. And I don't know, I'm speculating about this because I'm not in the security industry at all. But it was about 2 years ago, there was a horrible bombing at Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England. And guy blew himself up and other people with him. I can't remember the reason. It's never a good one. But what struck me about it was within 24 hours, the authorities announced that this was not an isolated incident. How do you do that if the evidence was blown up? And how you do that is you go look at the footage and you rewind it, and you have enough surveillance angles. They essentially tracked that guy back to his apartment and then tracked him going back from there, and found that he met with other people who were on watch lists, and they could identify those people. So that's a good use case. No one's privacy was encroaching because there was more than probable cause. There was an actual crime that and then you can go scan. No one else in those videos was scanned. They were all safe. No one was tracked. But the data was there for security agencies to go look at and say, "Oh, this is what happened." It sounds a bit creepy if we say, "Well, we've been captured all the time." I probably prefer it not to be the case, but that's not the discussion here. That is the reality of our world these days. We are being captured all the time. I think the important thing to understand is that does not mean we're being tracked. But once again, that brings us back to, so yes, there are definite use cases that we can't see today, but this is why democracy is so important and why good leadership is so important. Because say if a Western government, say if the American government changes its laws on these things and suddenly gives everyone permission to track people that opposed a specific political party 10 years from now, it's possible. The technology is there, and it's dangerous. One other thing I'll say to that is, what's really nice about facial recognition technology is that's very personal to us. So we feel it's a bit creepy if people are tracking me, but they are tracking you much better through your phone and the apps that you use. So it's really cool way. It's like a bit of a canary in the coal mine. It's really a cool, cool is not the right word, but useful. I have teenagers. A useful topic to discuss, because the principles should be applied to other surveillance technologies that are more prevalent and more powerful. So, yeah.
That was great. Thank you.
I can finish up with a few last notes on this. Maybe there's something interesting I can share. Let's just see. Oh, one question that I anticipated and that didn't come was, we did touch on it, was what prevents, because I'm not saying facial recognition is okay. I don't have an opinion. It's like electricity. You really can't have an opinion on it. Electricity is great. It gives us this. It's not so good if someone shocks to death. And so computer vision is the same thing. The uses of these things are important. And I often get the question saying, right, we're now allowing people to take all these pictures. We've got so many webcams going. What prevents someone from doing what this other startup did? Well, nothing prevents them. That's the reality. This is true of all new technology. So if you take a car as an analogy to that, as a society, we accept the losses that come with giving people cars. We know people are going to die. It's actually amazing that we do that. But we weigh it up as a society and say the progress outweighs the potential deaths, and we're going to try and minimize the deaths. So we have laws. We say you have to be of a certain age before you can drive. You need to drive. You need to be able to pass a test. You have to wear a seatbelt. In these areas, you stay within these laws, these speed limits. Got a lot of laws that manages this technology, which is a car. None of those laws prevent someone from driving a car into a group of protesters and killing someone. To prevent that, we've got a few things. One of it is we want to make sure that if someone is planning something like that, that they know they're going to get locked up. There will be consequences. The other one is just to have a morally sound society where we have open discussion there are things that aren't technology based that prevents that. And the same is true of facial recognition. We do not have to have specific laws. And why I'm hammering on those links is because we've got limited resources. I don't want to see legislators running around chasing CCTV cameras and drones. They should be chasing, as the ACLU is doing, those guys that scrape information, because I know that's the key thing. And then we need to publicly shame people like that, because they're not making the world a better place. They're making it a worse place. And there's a reason we've got a legal system. There's a reason we vote for people. Reason we've got a democracy. So folks like that, I just saw that company. I don't know them intimately, so saw they got another round of funding for $8 million. That's not cool. And as a society, we need to speak out against that. So,
we are at time, but thank you for this. It was really, really informative. Appreciate it. How would you like for the attendees to contact you later?
Meet me at the Starbucks. No, it's LinkedIn or Twitter is good. My email address is Tinus, Tinus @fancam.com. And guys, reach out. I love talking about these things. It's a moving target, but it's important that we discuss it as a society, and not just technologists and legal folks or politicians, but everyone together. Thank you very much for those who joined, and for those that I know, like myself, will watch this on demand later.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.